So this is a video for neo-pronoun users to duet. Or, if you're considering neo-pronouns for yourself, maybe even try a blind react. However, safety first, before you do either of those things, make sure you're in a mental state where if you do get misgendered, you will be okay. Alright, are you ready? Let's get started. Do you see this person next to me? E is my friend. C has had to put up with a lot to get to where Per is today. I just want to let Glint know that thon is valid, that ver pronouns are valid, and that Sarah identity is valid. I wish Void all the best, and look forward to maybe even seeing some of their lovely content someday. Please, treat them with respect, and I'm sure A will respect you too. So how did that feel? Are there any neo-pronouns that stuck out to you that you might want to use for yourself? Good luck on your pronoun journey.
So yeah, that made me feel very cringe. It made me feel very uncomfortable. And shout out to Sky Australia for always having these clips of people on the left losing it. But yeah, it just makes me think and realize that this is not just a problem within the United States. This is a problem that people in the West are recognizing. This is the result of what Jordan Peterson was talking about. If you guys aren't aware, Jordan Peterson is a clinical psychologist as well as professor, and he was canceled 5 or 6 years ago because of his thoughts on gender identity as well as the government compelling our usage of speech. I think it's very important to understand that words have meaning, and when we are starting to expand the vocabulary and starting to blur the lines of certain words and there are no longer definitions for simple biological terms such as man and woman, I think we start to have these type of problems with people who are easily impressionable as well as a little lost for guidance, people who might struggle with gender identity, as we all struggled with some sort of identity issues growing up. I think that these young minds can be easily influenced and embody these words and these meanings. And that's why we have people that are lost. I'm gonna shut up and share the clip.
Bill C-16 purported to do nothing but extend human rights provisions to an excluded group, let's say, to the transgender and non-gender binary types. And that was the federal legislation. It also made it a hate crime to discriminate or harass, essentially. So now then the question is, well, what exactly do you mean by discriminate or harass? And why exactly is that a hate crime under the criminal code? Well, there was an answer to that. The answer was, well, this bill will be interpreted in light of the policies generated by the Ontario Human Rights Commission. Very large set of policies. Now, the Ontario Human Rights Commission is a radically leftist organization. I think it's the most dangerous organization in Canada, although you could debate that. And they set all sorts of policies about how this legislation was going to be interpreted, and the federal government linked to their website to state that Bill C-16 would be interpreted in light of those guidelines. So I went and read all the policies. Well, one of the policies was that if you didn't use the preferred pronouns of a given group, that you could be charged essentially with a hate crime. And I thought, no,
which given group is that?
It's an issue because you're basing this law off of an ideology that is constantly changing. Like I said, this is from a podcast that he did 5 years ago. We can see how far the language has come. Not only are there hundreds of different pronouns, as you saw in the first clip, is now also interchangeable as you're speaking to that one individual person. You can change from a zim to a zer to a she to a he to an it. It's now starting to blur the lines of not only what are you, but are you a woman? Can you participate on women's sports teams? Can you come into the women's locker room? Are you using a female's bathroom if you are a zim, zer, it? If you're non-binary because you don't identify or you don't conform to any particular gender, where do we fit you in a very binary society? I don't know. And I think this is just one way that the youth are trying to find attention or get special treatment. This is the cool new thing, is to be transgender. So you want to feel special, you want to feel better than other people, then pick a victim. And transgender just so happened to be the topic of the day.
There's 70 different sets of pronouns approximately to hypothetically describe people who don't fit
Too many.
anywhere on the gender spectrum, which is also something that I don't really understand. I don't understand that conceptually. Like,
we'll come to that. But I just want to hear the story of this bill first.
Okay, so now a person is compelled under Canadian law to use the pronoun of another individual's choice on pain of law. And I thought, well, no, that's not acceptable. It's one thing to put limits on what a person can't say, like say with hate speech laws, which I also don't agree with, by the way, but that's a different argument. I think it's a narrower argument. But to compel me to use a certain content when I'm formulating my thoughts or my actions under threat of legislative action, I thought, no, what's happened there is the government has introduced compelled speech legislation into the private sphere. It's never happened in the history of English common law.
So yeah, I agree that it does become an issue when the government steps in, because now you're compelling people to use language that is backed up by an ideology that most of us probably don't agree with. We're not just talking about using the opposite pronoun. You've introduced a whole entire collection. They're not even real words, some of these neo-pronouns. Like, I've never used the word zer. Maybe in another language somewhere out there it might have a meaning to it, but you guys are forcing this on people, and that's a very dangerous thing.
There's no way I'm abiding by that. I don't care what your damn rationale is. We're compassionate. It's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're playing this radical collectivist left-wing game. You're trying to gain linguistic supremacy in the area of public discourse. You're doing that using compassion as a guise, and you're pulling the wool over people's eyes. And you're not going to do it with me.
And again, in order for people to gain acceptance and embrace any marginalized group, you can't just force it upon people. You actually have to educate them and show them and introduce them to people who are of that community. It's more likely that someone like Jordan Peterson is going to respect you and your pronouns if he understands you and understand that there is not some sort of leftist agenda behind it. And that goes for me as well. I've mentioned in my comment section in the past that I used to actually live with a friend that was transgender. I was friends with Barbara because I worked at a nail salon where she was the first customer. And through this experience of getting to know Barbara, because Barbara continued to show up to the nail salon every single day as if she was a paid employee, I was able to actually have the conversation with Barbara. Barbara was in her 60s when I met her, and I actually spent a number of months living with her as well. Through my transition of changing my major from nursing to marketing, I had a couple of months where I didn't have a place to stay, and Barbara welcomed me in. So not only was I friends with this person, I worked with this person, I also lived with this person. So I do feel comfortable in respecting her preferred pronoun. However, Barbara never pushed it on me. And you have to remember, I'm talking about 2011, 2012, 2013 timeframe. This is before gay marriage was even legalized. This is a very new concept. And so from the opportunity of getting to know Barbara and understand Barbara and understand what it means to be trans in someone that was what I would consider a classic transgender person, someone like Bruce Jenner, who is now Caitlyn Jenner, who understands that biologically they are male, but mentally, maybe they don't necessarily feel connected to their body. And I can respect that. You know, I might not understand. I might not be able to say that I can feel where you're coming from, but on some levels I can. I feel like whenever you're able to sympathize with someone and realize that they're human just like you are, that's how we were able to get closer to a culture of acceptance of not just trans people, but of people of all different ethnic backgrounds, people of different racial backgrounds, people of different political backgrounds. If you actually have the conversation with them and try to understand them without trying to change their mind necessarily, but understand them, and through the art of conversation, which we have basically no idea of anymore, I think we can get there. But by creating these laws and these policies, you're only creating more ammo for people on the left and people on the right to create an image of a much more hostile environment than what it is. And in turn, it actually creates an environment that is hostile. You actually then get people who are actually more confused because they have been made to think that this is an actual gender identity. They actually think that this is a group, a community, but they're misled, they're misguided, and we're not doing enough to actually address the issue and address the root of the problem. Let's get back into it. Let's see what Joe had to say on the Joe Rogan podcast, because he does further explain how he feels about transgender people as individuals. And I think that's very important, because a lot of people have tried to paint Jordan Peterson as this evil, maniacal, super red-pilled, misogynist, word salad man. And I think it can't be further from the truth. But let's hear it from him.
Well, let's get through some of that then, yeah. just to sort of establish it for people maybe that don't know. What issues do you have any issue whatsoever with someone being transgender?
No, I don't have any issue with that. What I have an issue...
Confirmed. And he said this 6 years ago. So I'm not really sure why people think that he has an issue with an individual's own choice to be transgender or have issues with transgender people at all.
No, I don't have any issue with that. What I have an issue with is that I don't like to see the postmodern neo-Marxists use the transsexual issue as a lever for pushing forward their political nonsense. And I said that right from the beginning in the videos I made to begin with. The reason I wouldn't use the words Z and Zer and all those other made-up words, however many there are now, is because I'm not willing to cede the linguistic territory to postmodern radicals. I'm not doing that. And they say, well, we're doing it on behalf of the oppressed transsexual people. And I think, yeah, well, that's what you say, but there's no reason I should believe that. I don't believe anything you say. I think you're contemptible, cowardly, ideologically motivated, cult-like corruptors of the youth. So why would I use your language?
Why would I abide to rules of people who are master manipulators? Like, you always have to question that. Why are you guys pressing so hard on an issue and trying to change the way that we speak, the way that we think? What is the motive behind this? Okay, because you guys haven't proven yourself to be the good guys. And again, I'm talking about the government. People that are putting policies into place. You guys are trying to make it seem like we're just trying to be accepting, we're just trying to be inclusive. But no. There's too many pronouns, and there's not an explanation as to why.
Let's unpack that, because one of the things that I find fascinating is how few transgender people want to use those words. The transgender people seem to want to identify with whatever gender they like. If you are a male to female transgender person, you would prefer to be called a she.
Right.
Like Caitlyn Jenner, right?
Right.
And pretty much everybody calls the artist formerly known as Bruce Jenner Caitlyn Jenner, right? That's just, it's like, if you had a look at how many people just openly accept that, it's pretty well accepted, right? Mm-hmm. Most transgender people prefer that. They prefer female to male. They prefer to be a man now. I'm a man now. Okay, Bob, Dick, whatever your name is. There's not a lot of Z-Zer talk.
Well,
maybe I'm out of the loop.
No, you're not out of the loop.
No, you're not out of the loop, Joe. But I don't think that you could have imagined where the culture would be today. Like I said, this was a Joe Rogan podcast from 6 years ago when they had this conversation. Things are changing radically, and they're happening so fast. Yes, Joe, I would say, like I mentioned earlier, Barbara and Bruce Jenner, who I would assume is a classic transgender. And yes, for them, I think it is just about being seen and being recognized and being respected as the gender that they are transitioning to. However, like I mentioned at the top of the video, this type of acceptance and this type of mentality and this type of acceptance of individuals, it can come from a good place. However, whenever it is leveraged and used by people of certain political backgrounds, it can now actually create an environment where that is normal. And I think that's why it's important, once again, to emphasize that words have meaning. Sometimes words are derived from a necessity, and sometimes words are added into our vocabulary. And again, you need to question why.
The other thing is, those are all third-person pronouns. It's like, I'm not going to call you a third-person pronoun while we're sitting here. I never would. If I'm referring to you when I'm talking to someone else,
call their name, right?
Well, I could use your name. I might use he then,
right.
but I don't know. Well, it's just, all of it is palpably absurd. I think it's always hard to get the level of analysis for this sort of issue correct, you know, because the people who are pushing it forward say, well, we're against harassment and discrimination, and they attribute all the moral virtue to themselves. But then what I see is that they're utilizing a group, a very small minority group, who already have enough problems, in my estimation, for nothing other than straightforward political purposes. I don't buy the warm-hearted, you know, all-inclusive love that the people who are pushing this sort of thing forward claim to display. I don't see that at all. What I see mostly is resentment and the desire to undermine. And I'm quite familiar with the postmodern philosophy, not as familiar as I could be, and also reasonably familiar with its underlying Marxism. And there's nothing touchy-feely about any of that, I can tell you. The postmodernist, the best you can do with postmodernist philosophy is emerge nihilistic. That's the best. The worst case is that you're a kind of anarchical social revolutionary that's directionless, except that you want to tear things apart. Or that you end up depressed, which I see happening to students all the time, because the postmodernists like rip out the remaining structures of their foundations, of their ethical foundations.
Because what is compassionate about having women being beaten to a pulp by trans women?
But just to be really clear for anybody tuning in, your issues are absolutely not with someone who identifies with a gender other than their biological gender.
As long as they're not using that to promote a political agenda. But I don't care about the gender thing. I mean, that's
doesn't mean anything.
Well, it's someone. It's
a personal preference.
It's a personal issue.
Right,
you know?
personal issue.
It's a personal issue, and I would also deal with it on an individual to individual basis.
Because it varies just as much as there are extremely masculine men, extremely feminine women, and there's a broad spectrum of human beings in between, and each one should be dealt with on an individual basis.
Yes.
Based on what they want. But when you're talking...
That is true. You should be treated on an individual basis, like I mentioned. And that's why these laws and policies are an issue, because you're no longer treating it as an individual. You're now treating it as a whole. You're creating a system where trans women are seen as women and are participating in women sports and participating in our spaces.
What it seems like is that some people are trying to push these made-up words and turn them mainstream. Now, the question is, what's the motivation behind that? Is this a necessary thing? Are there so many people that are of asexual or of some sort of... I mean, what would be a Z or a Zer? What is that supposed to be? Is that supposed to be a male or a female? Is it supposed to be asexual? Or is it supposed to be a nonconformist? I mean, what is it?
Well, it's supposed to be someone whose gender isn't specified, right? Who's neither male nor female. Right, or maybe they say...
Again, and I'm sorry that I keep hitting pause, but that is an issue, because if you're a nonconformist and you're neither male or female, then how are we supposed to treat you? What category are you going to participate in society?
They technically in the policy guidelines is anywhere or nowhere on the spectrum. And that's actually in the policy guidelines in Ontario.
Anywhere or nowhere.
Right, and the nowhere. I mean, these are policies that are going to determine law, right? That within which the law is going to be interpreted. I don't even know what nowhere on the spectrum means. I don't understand what that means.
Doesn't mean anything. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. So
open for interpretation.
So here's the options, right? There's someone who identifies with the opposite gender of their biological birth. So there's a man, for instance, who identifies as a woman. Everyone's cool with that. Whatever your name is, whatever you would like to be called, whether it's Wendy or Mike or whatever it is, that would be the noise that you want people to make with their mouth that means you. That's it, right? Now, whether you're a he or a she outside of that, that's where things get squirrely. So third person is the only issue. The only issue is, like, say if we were talking to Jamie. Jamie just decided he's going to be Jamie now. He's still Jamie. Jamie's a girl's name, too. I know girls named Jamie. So he could be Jamie. And Jamie decides he's a woman. And now he wants to be called she. And we're like, okay, she. All right, Jamie, now you're she. But when it gets to, like, Zer and Z and the 78 different gender pronouns, it seems to a person outside of it, a person who's cisgendered, it seems pretty bizarre. And it seems pretty preposterous, and it seems pretty indulgent, And it seems like there's something else going on. And this is
well,
what
that's the thing. It's the something else going on part that is what concerns me. There is something else going on. If there wasn't something else going on, a relatively obscure professor's amateurish YouTube videos on a relatively obscure piece of Canadian legislation wouldn't have had any effect, right? It would have just disappeared. But it didn't. And that's because there's more going on than the straightforward issue surrounding the pronoun use, and everybody knows it, or everybody feels it at least.
Well, what it seems like from someone who's outside of academia, someone like me, is it seems like you're pushing back against something that they are really trying hard to establish, and that it's some kind of control. It's some kind of control with how people behave and communicate. And it's not like a societal thing. It's a very small, isolated group of people that seem to be trying to indoctrinate others into their ways. And they're becoming very vocal and very angry and, in a sense, like verbally violent about your opposition to their controlling the way that other people communicate.
Yeah, well, they don't like me.
So the minority becomes the majority when enough people become indoctrinated into a certain way of thinking and a certain ideology. This was 6 years ago, so fast forward to 2024, I'm going to share with you guys some clips that did go viral on TikTok of lefties losing it.
He's having a nice feast.
She, her.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's all good.
But it was not all good.
Hi. I use she, her pronouns. I'm not sir.
Oh,
yeah, like it's like a knife in the heart. I did specifically ask ahead of time not to be called
I wish
sir.
I could put a real knife in the heart.
Okay. The sweet water starts at okay. Not.
I'm so sorry. I apologize.
It's just always like a knife. It always hurts every time. I was wondering if there's a manager I could talk to about something that happened. Yeah, I was called sir.
And what about when adults employ misgenders you intentionally?
While he's talking, you're talking.
You just misgendered me again.
Okay.
Multiple times.
Gotcha.
Both of you have.
Wasn't intentional, but if you want to take it personal, that's also.
Well, she did do it intentionally twice.
You're talking to me too.
You said she and then you said he.
You're being condescending, and if you want to continue, I have full authority to escort you out the building right this moment. If you want to play that game with me.
Okay.
Would you like
Let's
to continue?
go. Bring out the authorities.
I'm good. I'll just put this on.
It's interesting to me that these people seem to always have their phones ready whenever these type of situations of misgendering comes about. And it seems like them turning to social media has been a way of them essentially trying to weaponize against these individuals on not using their preferred pronouns. I don't know how much I can stress in this video and in other videos how important words are, because words do have meanings, and these meanings are being changed and being altered right before our eyes. Anyways, I enjoyed having this conversation, and I'll speak again with you guys next time. Bye.